Please, sir. I beg you. Come home now. She's hurting the child. Sofia Martinez's voice trembled through the thin night air as she pressed herself against the side of the house, hiding in the narrow space between the garden wall and the back door. Her apron was soaked, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Steam still clung to her skin, the sting of hot water burning along her forearm. But none of that mattered. Not compared to the little girl still trapped inside. Just minutes earlier, the living room had been a quiet battlefield, one where only a child and a maid ever seemed to bleed. Elizabeth had stood in the center of the room, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with terror. Victoria towered over her, immaculate as always in a cream silk blouse and black slacks. Her makeup flawless, her hair perfectly curled, beauty sharpened into cruelty. "I told you," Victoria hissed, "to clean up your toys. Do you think I have time to raise a useless little brat?" "She's 6, Sofia had said, stepping forward before she could think better of it. "She's just 6. Miss Victoria. Please, she didn't mean." "Shut your mouth." Victoria rounded on her, face twisting. "Don't you dare speak to me like we're equals. Your help. A maid. Nothing more." Sofia swallowed hard. "I'm just asking you to go easy on her." "Easy?" Victoria laughed a terrible, cold sound. "Do you think life is easy? Do you think her father needs a weakling for a daughter?" Elizabeth whimpered, shrinking behind Sofia's leg, and perhaps it was that tiny, fragile sound like glass cracking that pushed Victoria over the edge. "I'll teach her a lesson," Victoria snapped, snatching the kettle from the kitchen counter where it had just finished boiling. Steam curled from its mouth like a warning. Sofia's heart froze. "Miss Victoria, no, no!" I was ad. But Victoria lifted the kettle anyway, anger twisting her features into something monstrous. Instinct pure. Desperate instinct took over. Sofia lunged, throwing herself in front of Elizabeth just as Victoria flung the boiling water. Pain lit across her forearm like fire slicing through skin. Sofia gasped, teeth clenched, trying not to cry out and terrify the child further. But the burn was deep, angry, immediate. Her sleeve darkened, sticking painfully to her skin. Elizabeth screamed, not because she was burned, but because she had seen what Victoria tried to do to her. "You stupid woman," Victoria snapped. "Look at what you made me do. Maybe getting burned will help you learn your place." "My place," Sofia said through gritted teeth, "is to protect this child." Victoria laughed sharply. "You think Richard will believe you? I'll tell him you tried to attack me. I'll tell him you're unstable. I'll tell him anything I want and he'll believe every word." "Seated. You can't keep hurting her," Sofia whispered. "You have no idea what I can do." Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And if you ever get in my way again, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I'll bury you, Sofia." Then she pointed toward the door. "Get out. Now." Sofia hesitated, glancing at Elizabeth, who was sobbing silently, clutching her rabbit so tightly its ear tore a little. Victoria noticed. "Don't even think about comforting her. Out." That. Sofia had no choice. She stepped outside, cradling her burned arm, blinking against the cold evening air. The door slammed behind her, shaking the porch light, but instead of walking away as ordered, Sofia slipped around the side of the house, hiding where she could still hear the muffled crying inside. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She pulled out her phone. Tried to dial Richard. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then voicemail. "Sir, please, please, I beg you," she whispered. "Come home now. She's hurting your daughter." Her breath came fast, fogging the air. Her arm throbbed with every heartbeat. She pressed the phone harder to her ear. Nothing. Silence. A void. Inside, she heard Victoria's voice again, scolding, mocking, belittling. "The water missed you this time," Victoria snapped. "Next time, maybe it shouldn't." Sofia's stomach twisted. She wanted to run in, scoop the little girl into her arms, and shield her from everything. But she had nothing, not authority, not power, not her employer's trust. Only the truth, only her courage, only the promise she'd once made to Elizabeth's mother at the funeral. "I'll watch over her. I'll protect her when you can't. Sophia pressed call again. Voicemail. She tried texting. Sir, please. It's urgent. Elizabeth is in danger. No reply. Her breath stuttered. She looked up at the massive windows of the mansion. Golden light spilling onto the manicured lawn. From where she stood, the house looked beautiful. Serene. Safe. But she knew better. It was a gilded cage for a grieving man, and a nightmare for his daughter. Sophia leaned her forehead against the cold brick, tears slipping down her cheek. She couldn't give up. Not tonight. She tried again, and again, and again. Finally, forcing her voice steady, she recorded a final message. Sir, if you don't come home now, I'm scared she'll do something unforgivable. Please, Elizabeth needs you. She needs someone to save her. Her burned arm pulsed with pain, but she didn't move. She stayed hidden in the shadows, listening, praying, hoping for a miracle. Inside, Victoria's voice rose again, and Elizabeth's tiny sobs grew softer. It was a sound Sophia would never forget, the sound of a child learning what fear really meant. Sophia looked down at her phone, still silent, still dark. Please, sir, she whispered into the night. If you don't come now, she might not survive this. It is no. If this moment broke your heart too, please like this video and tell us where you're watching from. Maybe someone near you is watching too. Sophia stayed pressed against the side wall of the house for as long as she dared. The pain in her arm was becoming unbearable, the skin blistering beneath the soaked sleeve of her uniform. Still, she didn't move. She couldn't not while that woman was alone inside with Elizabeth. When the sounds from the living room finally quieted, no more shouting, no more whimpering, Sophia slowly made her way toward the garage, slipping in through the side entrance and entering through the back hallway. The surveillance cameras didn't cover this stretch. She'd made sure of it weeks ago when she first realized she might need a way back in. Her shoes were wet from the garden soil, leaving faint tracks on the tile as she crept silently through the servants' corridor and into the shadows of the kitchen. In the adjacent room, she could hear Victoria laughing softly, an eerie, rehearsed sound that scraped against Sophia's nerves. Come now, Elizabeth. If you're going to act like a child, don't expect to be treated like a princess. Sophia's jaw tightened. From her hiding spot near the pantry, she watched as Victoria poured herself a glass of red wine, her expression calm, as though nothing had happened. She wore cruelty like a perfume, invisible to those who didn't get close enough to breathe it in. Just then, footsteps came down the stairs, small ones, hesitant. Elizabeth. She stood at the base of the staircase in her wrinkled pink nightgown, still clutching her rabbit, her bare feet making soft, uncertain sounds on the polished floor. Her dark curls were tangled, and her eyes were rimmed with red. Are you done sulking? Victoria asked, without turning around. Because if you cry again, I'll take that stuffed thing and toss it in the fireplace. Elizabeth didn't reply. She only nodded, a broken, mechanical gesture Sophia had seen too often. Victoria smirked and took a slow sip of wine. Good. I don't enjoy punishing you, Elizabeth, but you leave me no choice. Your father expects perfection. He deserves it. I have prosand. Sophia bit down on her tongue until she tasted blood. She wanted to storm in. She wanted to scream, but she knew what that would cost her. Richard wouldn't believe her. Not yet. The truth was, he hadn't wanted to see anything clearly since his wife died. 2 years ago, he buried her in the rain and buried himself in work. The house had become cold and lifeless, despite its size. He stopped reading bedtime stories. He stopped eating dinners at home, and Elizabeth, left in the quiet, had faded into the background. Then came Victoria. She appeared one Sunday afternoon at a charity fundraiser in Boston wearing pearls and an ocean blue dress, offering empathy and understanding. She told Richard she had lost someone too. She spoke about grief with elegance, about recovery with poise. She knew exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to listen just enough to look sincere. Within months, she was visiting the estate on weekends. By summer, she was living there. To outsiders, she was a blessing, a second chance for a man who'd suffered enough. Even Richard's sister, Margaret, said she was the kind of woman you could trust with your name, your child, and your legacy. But Margaret didn't live here. Sophia did. She saw what others couldn't. The way Victoria's patience snapped when Richard wasn't around. How Elizabeth flinched when Victoria entered a room. The missing meals. The tears. The silences. And tonight, the boiling water. Victoria crossed into the living room, settling onto the white suede couch as if the child she'd just traumatized was merely an inconvenience. She picked up the remote, flipped on the fireplace, and turned the television to a soft jazz station. "Go upstairs," she said to Elizabeth. "You've wasted enough of my night." Elizabeth hesitated. She looked toward the kitchen, toward the place Sophia was hidden but didn't move. "Did you hear me?" Victoria snapped. "Do I need to carry you up?" Elizabeth's eyes dropped to the floor. She turned and slowly made her way back up the stairs. Only when the child was out of sight did Sophia finally slip from the pantry and head for the laundry room. She gritted her teeth as she pulled up her sleeve to examine the burn. The skin was red and raw, blistering at the edge. It would scar. She didn't care. She needed to protect Elizabeth. From her apron, she retrieved the napkin-wrapped sandwich she'd tried to make earlier. She carried it upstairs, pausing at the door to Elizabeth's bedroom. The hallway was dark, but the little nightlight in the shape of a butterfly cast a soft glow under the door frame. She knocked once softly. A whisper came through the door. "Sophia? It's me, baby." Elizabeth opened the door, eyes wide. She looked at the sandwich and then at Sophia's arm. "You're hurt." Sophia knelt down. "I'm okay. This is for you. Eat it before she hears." "I heard her screaming," Elizabeth said quietly. "Was it because of me?" "No, sweetheart. It was because of her." Elizabeth took the sandwich, her hands trembling. Sophia brushed her hair gently. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. I miss Mommy," Elizabeth whispered. "I think Daddy forgot about her." Sophia's throat tightened. "No, baby. He just doesn't know how to remember her." To his Zarge. She stayed a few minutes longer, listening to Elizabeth's small chewing sounds, watching her shoulders slowly relax. Then Sophia returned to her room. Once there, she sat down on her narrow bed, pulled out her phone again, and began uploading the audio file of Victoria's threats to the encrypted cloud folder she had set up the week before. It wasn't enough. Not yet, but she was building a case, and one day soon, Richard would see. She lay back carefully, her arm throbbing, and stared up at the ceiling. The house around her was silent again. Too silent. But she had made a promise to a woman 6 feet under and to a girl upstairs who had no one else. She would not break that promise, not for anything. The next morning began like any other, at least on the surface. The sun filtered through the kitchen windows in soft golden streaks. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of toast and scrambled eggs. Everything looked perfect, as it always did in the Walker estate. But beneath that polished veneer, something deeply wrong pulsed like a bruise under pale skin. Sophia stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with her good hand. Her left arm, wrapped tightly in gauze and hidden beneath a long-sleeved blouse, throbbed with every small movement. The burn was worse than she'd admitted, but she couldn't afford weakness. Not now. Not when Elizabeth needed her more than ever. The child hadn't said much during breakfast. She picked at her food, shoulders slumped, gaze unfocused. Her usual spark was gone, replaced by something hollow and far too old for her age. Victoria, of course, was all smiles. She strolled into the dining room wearing a silk robe. Her makeup flawless, even at 8 a.m. She kissed the top of Elizabeth's head with a smile that was purely performative. "Morning, darling. Did you sleep well?" Elizabeth didn't answer. Sophia's jaw clenched. She watched as Victoria moved through the room like she owned every inch of it, because in her mind, she did. Everything was part of her stage. The child, the house, the man, and Richard, he was still blind. He hadn't come home last night. Again, according to the calendar on the fridge, he was in New York for meetings. Sophia had checked the flights. He wouldn't be back until the evening. That gave her one more day to plan, one more day to protect. When Victoria left to take a phone call in the sunroom, Sophia sat beside Elizabeth at the table and gently nudged the plate toward her. "Try one more bite, sweetie. You need strength." Elizabeth nodded but didn't lift her fork. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. She said, "If I cry today, She'll lock Mr. Bunny in the freezer. Sophia blinked. She said what? She said it's to teach me how to be cold, like a grown-up. Sophia took a deep breath and counted slowly to 5. She couldn't afford to scream, not now. Instead, she reached into her apron and pulled out the tiny stuffed rabbit she had rescued the night before, hidden safely in her laundry basket. I kept him safe for you. Elizabeth's eyes welled up. She hugged Mr. Bunny tight, then looked at Sophia like she was the only real thing left in the world. She says Daddy loves her more than me now. Sophia crouched beside her, keeping her voice steady. That's not true, but she said he's going to marry her, and when he does, she's going to make new rules. No toys, no baby stuff, no crying. Sophia's heart shattered. She reached out and gently brushed a curl from Elizabeth's cheek. Listen to me, baby girl. Your father loves you. He's just confused. Grown-ups mess up sometimes. They see what they want to see. But I promise you, I'm going to help him understand. Elizabeth looked doubtful. How? Sophia glanced around to make sure Victoria was still out of sight. Then she pulled her phone from her pocket and showed Elizabeth the app she used to record audio. I've been keeping little pieces. Things, she says. The way she talks to you when no one else is around. It's called evidence. Evidence. Elizabeth frowned. Will that make him believe you? I hope so, Sophia said. But I need your help. Madagro. The child's voice dropped. She'll be mad if I say anything. I know. That's why we'll be careful. But Elizabeth, if we don't tell him the truth, she'll never stop. Elizabeth clutched her rabbit tighter and nodded. Just once, that afternoon, Sophia started compiling everything. Every clip, every note she'd written, dates, times, direct quotes. She created a backup file on a secure cloud storage and printed out transcripts for the most damning recordings. But she needed one more thing, a confession, or at least something that would show Victoria's true nature. So, that evening, when the house quieted again and the sky darkened into deep November blue, Sophia turned on her phone's voice recorder and left it tucked beneath the couch cushion in the living room. She had a feeling Victoria would come in there tonight, and she was right. Later, as Sophia pretended to fold laundry in the hallway, she heard Victoria's voice carry through the open door. I don't care what Richard thinks. Once we're married, she's gone. Both of them, if necessary. I'm not raising someone else's brat. Sophia froze. The person on the other end of Victoria's call laughed, a woman, someone Victoria trusted. She's so pitiful, clinging to that rabbit like it's her mother. It's pathetic. Honestly, I'm doing her a favor. Sophia's stomach twisted. She waited a few more minutes, then retrieved the phone and saved the file. It was her best evidence yet. At 9 p.m., the front door opened. Richard was home. The moment he walked in, Victoria greeted him like a 1,950 seconds housewife. Hair brushed, makeup refreshed, a glass of wine ready in her hand. How was the flight, darling? Long, he said, loosening his tie. And your meetings? Fine. He looked tired, distant, still blind. Elizabeth and I baked cookies, Victoria said brightly. Didn't we, sweetheart? Elizabeth appeared at the top of the stairs, her body stiff. She nodded slowly, but her eyes found Sophia's and silently begged, Not tonight, please. Richard smiled. That's great. I'm glad you two are getting along better. Sophia knew she had to act. This couldn't wait, not another night. Sir, she said gently. Could I speak with you privately? Just for a moment? Victoria's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. Richard hesitated. Now? I just got in. Sophia nodded. It's about Elizabeth. Victoria looped her arm through his. It's fine, love. She's just having a hard time adjusting to me. I'm sure it's nothing serious. Sophia stepped forward, voice calm but firm. Sir, with all respect, I believe your daughter is in emotional danger, and I have recordings you need to hear. Richard blinked. Recordings? Victoria gasped. Are you recording us in this house? She's been abusive, Sophia said, her voice cracking. I didn't know how else to make you see. Richard raised a hand. Enough. Both of you. AP1. He looked between the two women, his fiancée, smiling and soft-spoken, and his housekeeper, arm bandaged, eyes pleading. "I don't want drama tonight," he said quietly. "Not after the week I've had. But sir, later, Sophia." And just like that, the moment passed. Sophia lowered her eyes. Victoria shot her a glance over Richard's shoulder, triumphant. But Sophia wasn't done. Not yet. She walked away, the weight of the recordings heavy in her pocket. Tomorrow, she would try again. The house had settled into its late evening quiet, the kind of hush that felt intentional, as if every lamp, every polished surface, every shadow held its breath. Upstairs, Elizabeth slept curled into a tight ball, her small fingers still gripping the ears of Mr. Bunny. Sophia checked on her twice before returning to her tiny room at the far end of the hall. Sleep, however, wasn't even a possibility. Not tonight. Not after what happened in the living room. Not after Richard dismissed her again. Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the recordings stored on her phone. They were damning slivers of truth captured in shaky audio clips. Victoria's threats, her insults, her coldness. But Richard had brushed it all aside because Victoria had smiled at him first. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and tried to gather herself. She had to be strong. She had to keep going, because tomorrow, Elizabeth might not be so lucky, and neither might she. A soft pattering of footsteps sounded from the hallway. "Sophia?" A small voice whispered. Sophia opened her door. Elizabeth stood there, her face pale, her cheeks streaked with dried tears. She clutched Mr. Bunny in one hand and a laminated sheet of paper in the other. "Sweetheart, what are you doing awake?" Sophia whispered, sinking to her knees. "I had a bad dream," Elizabeth said softly, "and I heard Victoria coming. I hid in the bathroom until she went downstairs." Sophia's stomach tightened. "Come inside, baby." Elizabeth stepped into the room and handed the laminated paper to Sophia. "She made me read this before bed," she said. "She makes me read it every night now." Sophia turned the sheet over. Her breath caught. The paper listed 10 rules, typed neatly with a decorative border like something from a schoolhouse, except the content was chillingly wrong. "I will not cry when Victoria is busy. I will not ask for food unless it is mealtime. I will not talk back. I will not bother Daddy about Mommy. I will not play loudly. I will not invite Sophia into my room unless Victoria says yes. I will not complain about punishments. I will not embarrass Victoria in front of Daddy. I will say sorry even if it isn't my fault. I will be a good girl, or Daddy will be disappointed." Sophia felt her pulse spike, her throat burning with helpless fury. "She makes you say these?" Sophia murmured. "Every morning and every night. And if you don't?" Elizabeth looked down. "She takes away something of mine." Sophia squeezed the child's hands. "Elizabeth, these rules aren't real. They're not okay. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to talk. You are allowed to be a child." "But she said Daddy agrees with all of them," Elizabeth whispered. "She said I'm only a good girl if I follow." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. "Oh, baby, that's not true. Not even close." Elizabeth sniffed. "Do you think Daddy loves me?" Sophia's heart cracked. "He loves you more than anything. He's just blinded right now. Adults sometimes believe what's easier, not what's right. But he will see. I promise you, he will see." Elizabeth crawled onto the bed beside her, curling against her side with the trust of someone who had nowhere else to go. Sophia held her until the child's breathing softened into sleep, then carefully carried her back to her room. She tucked her in and placed Mr. Bunny beside her pillow, but she didn't leave right away. Instead, she turned on her recording app and whispered into it. Evidence. November 14th. The child is being forced to memorize written punishments. Emotional control. Coercion. Rule number 10 is especially concerning. Daddy will be disappointed. Clear manipulation. She saved the file. Then she returned to her room, carrying the laminated sheet like a piece of radioactive material. Her hand shook as she took a picture of it and backed the photo up to her secure drive. If Victoria ever found out, she'd retaliate. Maybe worse. Sophia sat at her desk, dragging a notebook toward her pages already filled with dates, times, and descriptions of incidents. Taped between the entries were printed screenshots. Destroyed toys, marks on the walls, recordings of whispered conversations, but the rules, they were the clearest evidence yet that Victoria had crossed a line most people never even approached. She flipped to a new page. November 14. The rules sheet. Psychological conditioning. Child forced to internalize blame, obedience, fear. Evidence attached. Her pen hovered over the page before she added, Richard still refuses to see. But when he finally looks, it will break him. Around 10:30 p.m. The house shifted again, the creaking of old wood as temperature dropped. The faint hum of the dishwasher. The muffled click of Victoria's heels. Sophia froze. Footsteps. Getting closer. The doorknob rattled. Her breath caught. The door cracked open. Victoria stood in the doorway wearing a satin nightgown, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, swept over Sophia's desk before landing on her. I thought I heard voices, Victoria said calmly. Sophia forced a smile. Just talking to my sister on the phone, ma'am. Victoria's lips twitched. Such a long call. I hope you weren't discussing anything inappropriate. Sophia's stomach tightened. Just family matters. Good. Victoria took one step inside. Because if I find out you are filling Elizabeth's head with nonsense, I will personally see to it that Richard fires you. And no one in this county hires a maid accused of manipulating a child. Sophia held her breath. Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper coated in poison. You think you're helping her? You're not. You're making her dependent. Weak. That's why she cries. That's why she's pathetic. Sophia's hand curled into a fist beneath the desk. Now, be a good employee, Victoria said smoothly. And stay out of grown-up business. She left as quietly as she came, her perfume lingering in the hall like a warning. Sophia exhaled shakily. She waited until she couldn't hear Victoria's footsteps anymore. Then she whispered to herself, she thinks this house belongs to her. But she has no idea I'm not letting her win. She didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. And when dawn touched the windows with pale light, Sophia rose with a single thought burning in her chest. Today, something has to change. At precisely 8:05 a.m., the school parking lot buzzed with the rhythm of a normal weekday, parents in SUVs, teachers sipping lukewarm coffee, and children clambering out of back seats with oversized backpacks. The front lawn of Willow Creek Elementary was littered with the reds and golds of November leaves, crunching under hurried footsteps. But for Sophia, this morning wasn't normal. She stood just outside the main office, gripping Elizabeth's tiny hand tightly in hers. The laminated rules sheet was folded in her coat pocket. Her left arm, still wrapped beneath her sleeve, ached with every movement. She hadn't told Elizabeth what exactly would happen today, only that someone very kind was going to listen. I'll be right outside, Sophia whispered, crouching to Elizabeth's height. Elizabeth looked terrified. She nodded silently, her grip on Mr. Bunny fierce. A moment later, the front door opened, and Miss Karen Price stepped out. Karen was the school's guidance counselor, early 50s, soft-spoken, and sharp as glass beneath her warm exterior. She'd taught in Chicago public schools for 20 years before moving to the Connecticut suburbs. She had seen broken homes before, broken children. And more than once, she'd been the first adult to believe them. Hi there, Elizabeth, she said gently. Would you like to come talk to me for a little bit? Elizabeth looked up at Sophia, who nodded with encouragement. It's okay, sweet girl. I'll be right here when you're done. Elizabeth stepped forward slowly, and Miss Price reached for her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. When the door closed behind them, Sophia exhaled for the first time that morning. She sat on the bench near the school's entrance, watching the cars drive off one by one. She knew what she had just done was risky. Victoria would find out eventually, and when she did, there would be hell to pay. But that didn't matter now. Only Elizabeth's voice did. Inside the guidance room, Elizabeth sat quietly on a cushioned chair. Mr. Bunny rested on her lap, and her feet barely reached the floor. Miss Price poured her a glass of water. No pressure, honey, she said. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I'm just here to listen. Elizabeth nodded. I heard from your nanny, Miss Sophia. Miss Price continued. She said things at home might be a little scary. Do you want to tell me about that? Elizabeth hesitated. Her lips moved, then stopped. She looked down at her stuffed rabbit. Then she pulled the laminated sheet out of her backpack and handed it over. Karen took it, scanning it quickly. Her brows furrowed. Did someone make you read this? Elizabeth nodded slowly. Every night and morning. Who made you do that? My dad's girlfriend, Victoria. Karen set the sheet aside carefully, like it was evidence in a courtroom. She leaned forward just slightly. Elizabeth, has Victoria ever hurt you? The little girl looked down, twisting her fingers together. She threw my toy in the fire, said it was my fault, and last night she almost poured hot water on me. Karen's throat tightened. She did what? But Sophia saved me. She jumped in front. She got burned. Karen stood slowly and walked over to her desk, picking up her phone. 5 minutes later, the principal and school social worker were in the room, along with the child protection liaison. Sophia was called in. The moment she entered, Elizabeth ran into her arms. She told them, Miss Price said softly. She was brave. Sophia nodded, hugging her tight. Then Karen turned to her. We're contacting Child Protective Services immediately. But Miss Martinez, if you have any recordings, written evidence, anything at all, we need it now. End quote. I brought everything, Sophia said, her voice steady. Recordings, photos, dates, and this. She handed over a flash drive and a folder of printed transcripts. By noon, the state had issued an emergency home investigation order. A pair of social workers were dispatched to the Walker estate. Sophia followed in her car, heart pounding the entire drive. The ride back was a blur of thoughts. Would Richard be there? Would he defend Victoria again? Would this be enough? When she pulled into the estate, the front gates were already open, and a white state vehicle was parked in the driveway. 2 social workers, 1 woman, 1 man, stood on the front porch, clipboards in hand, and Victoria stood in the doorway, her smile brittle and taut. Well, she said coolly as Sophia stepped out of the car, I see you've decided to start a war. Indeed. Sophia didn't answer. She simply stood by as the social workers explained why they were there. Victoria's protests were calm at first, civil, measured. I'm shocked, she said. Absolutely shocked. Elizabeth and I have bonded. This woman is she's obsessed, jealous. You have to understand. She's had trouble letting go. Sophia stayed silent. Let her dig her own hole. Then one of the social workers asked to speak with Elizabeth directly. When told the child wasn't home, the woman raised an eyebrow. You were informed Elizabeth had to be present during this visit. Victoria blinked. She's at a friend's house. Sophia stepped forward. She's at school. I brought her there this morning. She's safe. The social worker nodded. Then we'll begin interviews immediately. For the next 2 hours, Victoria squirmed. Her stories didn't match. Her excuses frayed at the edges. Then Richard arrived. He stepped out of his black car, briefcase in hand. Confusion painted across his face. When he saw the state vehicle, his eyes narrowed. What's going on here? Mr. Walker, the lead social worker said, extending a hand. We're conducting a child welfare investigation. There have been multiple reports of emotional abuse and neglect inside the home. Richard looked stunned. That's not possible. Sophia stepped forward, quietly handing him a printed transcript and a small recording device. Please, she said. Listen to it. All of it. He looked at her, then at the file in his hands. Victoria moved toward him. Don't listen to her. I said stop. His voice was soft, but it cut through the air like steel. Then, silence. And for the first time, Richard read. He pressed play, and the sound of his fiancée's voice, mocking, cruel, manipulative, filled the driveway. He listened to Elizabeth's recorded whisper. She says Daddy will be disappointed if I cry. I'm at together. And something inside him broke. The front lawn of the Walker estate had never been so quiet. Richard stood on the walkway, unmoving, the recording still playing from the small black device in his hand. His face, usually composed with the cool detachment of a man used to commanding boardrooms, now contorted with disbelief. Then something deeper, grief, maybe, or guilt. Sophia didn't speak, neither did the social workers. Even Victoria had fallen silent, her hands trembling at her sides, mascara smudged under her eyes. All her rehearsed smiles and glossy charm were crumbling, second by second. The recording ended with Elizabeth's voice soft, barely audible, but heartbreaking in its honesty. She says Daddy loves her more, and that if I cry again, he'll give me away like a broken toy. Richard's grip tightened on the device. "Where is my daughter?" he asked, his voice low. "She's safe," Sophia said. "She's at school. She told the counselor everything." Richard turned his eyes on Victoria, who opened her mouth but nothing came out. "You said you loved her," he said, his voice rising. "You said she needed structure, that she cried because she missed her mother. You said I needed to be stronger with her, that I was being weak." "I was helping," Victoria snapped, her composure fracturing. "She was a mess. You couldn't handle her grief, so I did what you couldn't. I kept her quiet. I kept her under control." "She's 6, Richard said through gritted teeth. "She's a child." His chest rose and fell with every breath. Then he turned to the lead social worker. "Can I see her? Now?" "You can meet us at the school," the woman said. "We'll be taking statements from both her and the staff." Richard nodded once and turned to Sophia. "Come with me." Victoria stepped forward. "You can't just take her side. She's the help, Richard." "You think she isn't manipulating you?" He froze. Then, slowly, he turned back toward her. "The help," he repeated quietly. "The woman who bandaged our child's scraped knees, who stayed up with her through nightmares, who sang to her when she couldn't sleep. The woman who just gave me the truth I was too blind to see." Victoria's face turned pale. "You're not just cruel," he added. "You're stupid." He stepped back. "You'll pack your things and leave tonight." You have no right." "I have every right," he snapped. "This is my home. My daughter. And this ends now." For a moment, it looked like Victoria might lunge forward, claw her way back into power with one last performance. But something in Richard's eyes, something final, stopped her. Without another word, she turned, storming into the house. Sophia stood frozen, unsure whether to feel victorious or terrified. Her body trembled not from fear now, but from the adrenaline draining out of her all at once. "Thank you," Richard said, quieter now. "You saved her." Sophia shook her head. "She saved herself. I just gave her the chance to be heard." They arrived at the school 20 minutes later. Inside the counselor's office, Elizabeth sat with her knees pulled up in the chair, Mr. Bunny on her lap. She looked up when the door opened, and the second she saw her father, she flinched. Richard stopped, visibly shaken by the reaction. "It's okay, Elizabeth," Sophia said gently, stepping into the room. "He knows now." Richard crouched beside the chair, slowly, his hands open. "Pumpkin," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." Elizabeth didn't move. She stared at him, eyes wide, unsure if this was another trick. "I didn't know what she was doing," he continued. "I didn't listen when you tried to tell me. That was my fault. But I'm listening now. I swear." Equaled 7, a tear slid down Elizabeth's cheek. "I miss Mommy," she whispered. Richard's face crumpled. "I do too," he said. "Every single day." He reached out slowly and Elizabeth let him take her hand. "I promise you," he said, "I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Sophia turned away, wiping her eyes. Outside the room, the school staff debriefed with CPS. A protective order was already being drafted. Victoria would be officially barred from the estate within 24 hours. Richard agreed to full home monitoring and therapy for both himself and Elizabeth. But most importantly, Elizabeth would never be alone with Victoria again. Later that night, back at the mansion, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed in the guest wing, her new room. Richard had insisted she move closer to Elizabeth's room, not just as her nanny, but as someone he finally trusted. "I should have seen it," he told her earlier. "I kept saying I was protecting my daughter, but I was protecting myself. From the truth. From my own guilt. You didn't just save her, Sophia. You reminded me what it means to be a father." Now, as the moonlight streamed in through the bay windows, Sophia finally allowed herself to breathe. Not all the way. Not yet. But enough to feel something she hadn't in months. Hope. Across the hallway, Elizabeth slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, and in the quiet of the house, for the first time in a long time, the air felt still, not like danger was hiding in the walls, but like maybe, just maybe, they had turned the page. It was 2 days after Victoria had been officially removed from the estate. Her departure had been swift, silent, and surgical. No tearful goodbyes, no dramatic confrontations, just a signed restraining order, a pair of sheriff's deputies watching as she packed, and a black sedan pulling away from the driveway without a single glance back. Richard had tried to return to work the next morning but lasted less than 3 hours. The moment he opened his laptop, saw the stack of ignored emails, and felt the heavy silence in his office, he closed the computer and drove home. There were more important things than quarterly projections and boardroom meetings. He had a daughter to repair, and guilt to reckon with. Sophia had kept busy, as always. But now that Victoria was gone, the air in the mansion shifted. The house no longer felt like it was holding its breath. The dark, rigid presence that had poisoned every room was gone. In its place was an odd stillness, like a wound beginning to scab over. That afternoon, as Sophia folded Elizabeth's laundry in the sunlit upstairs playroom, Richard appeared in the doorway, holding a silver flash drive. "I found something," he said. Sophia looked up, surprised by the tension in his voice. "Found what?" "I had our IT guy pull security footage from the in-home system. Turns out, Victoria forgot the hallway cameras didn't only cover the main floor." Sophia stood up slowly. "What do you mean?" Richard stepped inside and set the flash drive on the table. "There's footage from 2 weeks ago." Elizabeth was in the living room coloring. Victoria came in. "I didn't know the camera above the bookshelf was even active, but it caught everything." She didn't know. Sophia stared at the flash drive, her stomach tightening. "Did you watch it?" "I did," he said. "Twice." He ran a hand over his face. She yanked Elizabeth's drawing out of her hand, tore it up in front of her, called her pathetic, said I would be ashamed of her. Then he swallowed hard. She grabbed the girl's arm so hard she left bruises. Sophia closed her eyes. "We found those bruises," she said. She tripped. "We didn't know." "I didn't want to know," Richard said softly. He sank into the chair beside the table, the weight of his shame finally finding a place to land. "I keep thinking, how long was I asleep at the wheel? How did I let someone like that get this close to my daughter?" Sophia walked over and sat across from him. "Because she was clever. Because grief makes us reach for anything that feels steady. Because you're human, Richard. But you see it now. That's what matters." He nodded slowly, but his expression remained haunted. "She weaponized my guilt, made me feel like Elizabeth's pain was my failure. And I let her." They sat in silence for a moment, only the soft hum of the ceiling fan above them. Then Sophia asked, "What are you going to do with the footage?" "I'm submitting it to CPS to be added to their case file, and I'm sending a copy to the lawyer. If she tries anything, presses for defamation, fights the restraining order, it's over." Sophia looked at him carefully. "And Elizabeth?" Richard stood up, walked over to the playroom window, and looked out at the backyard. "I'm learning how to be her father again. Not her manager, not her provider, her dad." He turned back to face her. "She asked me to read to her last night. The same book her mother used to read. I couldn't get through the first page without crying. She didn't say a word. She just held my hand." Sophia smiled gently. "She's forgiving. That child has more grace in her than most adults I know." "She has that from her mom," Richard said. "But she has strength from you." Sophia looked away, flustered. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Richard said firmly. "Most people would have walked away. You stayed." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. It was Margaret, Richard's sister. She hadn't been to the house since the funeral, but today she stood in the doorway with a pie in her hands and worry in her eyes. "I came as soon as I heard," she said. Richard and Sophia exchanged a glance, then welcomed her in. As Margaret settled onto the couch and really listened to what had happened, Sophia saw something shift. Another adult, another voice who believed. Margaret looked at Richard, then at Sophia. "I'll do whatever I can to help," she said. "Elizabeth's not alone anymore." Later that night, as the house settled once again into its quiet rhythm, Elizabeth curled up on the couch in her pajamas while her father read aloud, his voice unsteady but real. Sophia sat in the armchair nearby, sewing a loose button back onto one of Elizabeth's dresses. The fireplace flickered, casting soft orange light across the room. Outside, winter was beginning to stir in the wind. But inside, the warmth was returning, slowly, steadily. And this time, it would stay. Sophia had just finished loading the dishwasher when she heard the footsteps overhead, slow, deliberate, creaking across the upper floor. Not Elizabeth, not Richard. She knew their patterns, their rhythms. This sound was different. She glanced at the clock. 9:46 p.m. The house was quiet. Elizabeth had been asleep for over an hour, tucked under her quilt, Mr. Bunny safely by her side. Richard had gone out for a late dinner meeting with his lawyer and Margaret. It was just her in the house, or so she thought. Sophia dried her hands and moved toward the staircase, pausing at the bottom to listen. Nothing. Then another creak. It came from above Elizabeth's room, the attic, a place she hadn't thought about in months. She climbed the stairs slowly, every nerve on alert. When she reached the attic door, she hesitated. It wasn't fully shut. A narrow crack glowed faintly from the bulb above. That bulb shouldn't be on, she thought. She took a breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. The air was stale and dusty, filled with the scent of old paper and cedar wood. Dozens of boxes lined the walls, holiday decorations, storage bins, forgotten furniture under sheets. In the far corner, the light flickered, and beneath it, a small open trunk. Sophia frowned and moved toward it. Inside the trunk were children's drawings, old, faded, some crumpled, some neatly stacked. Others were torn in half and poorly taped back together. In one corner was a pink ribbon stained with what looked like juice. Another corner held a cracked photo frame. She picked it up. It was Elizabeth and her mother smiling on a beach. Sand on their arms, sun in their hair. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. But as she turned the photo over, something slipped from behind the backing. A note. It was folded 3 times, the paper brittle and stained. Sophia unfolded it carefully. It was handwritten, in elegant cursive. Richard, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you everything. About her. About Victoria. Sophia's breath caught. She read on. I know you trust her. I know she's helped with the company. But she's not who she pretends to be. She's manipulative, controlling, and something in my gut tells me she's not safe. Not for me. Not for our daughter. The date on the letter was 7 months before Elizabeth's mother passed. Sophia clutched the paper, her hands trembling. She turned, scanned the attic, and spotted another box labeled personal. Julia. She dropped to her knees and opened it. Journals. Sophia pulled out one and flipped to a random page. March 3. Victoria criticized Elizabeth again today. Said she was too soft, too slow, too needy. I told Richard, but he brushed it off. He said Victoria was just being blunt, but it didn't feel right. It felt rehearsed, calculated, like she was chipping away at my confidence as a mother. Another entry. April 10. Found Victoria in Elizabeth's room. She said she was tidying, but Elizabeth was crying, hiding in the closet. When I asked what happened, she said Victoria called her a waste of space. I confronted her. She denied everything, said I was being paranoid. Am I? Sophia's chest felt tight. These weren't just suspicions, these were warnings, and no one had listened. She snapped photos of every page, then carefully refolded the letter and slid it into her pocket. By the time she returned to the kitchen, her hands were still shaking. She called Richard. He answered on the second ring. I found something, she said, from Julia, a letter. Silence. Where? In the attic. In her old boxes. It was hidden in a photo frame. Richard didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, can you bring it to me? 10 minutes later, Sophia pulled into the parking lot of the restaurant. Richard was already waiting by the door, coat in hand, his eyes searching. She handed him the letter. He read it once, then again. His face went pale. She tried to tell me, he whispered. She was trying to protect us, and I didn't see it. Sophia placed a hand on his arm. You see it now. He stared out over the parking lot, jaw clenched. I need to know everything Victoria touched. Emails, bank accounts, my will, Elizabeth's trust. If she was manipulating me this long, who knows what else she tried to control. I'll help you, Sophia said. Richard looked at her, something soft flickering behind the weight in his gaze. Why are you still here? He asked. After everything. After how I doubted you. Because Elizabeth needs me, she said simply. And so do you. Back at the house, the attic remained open, silent, watching, and in the trunk, under the ribbon and drawings, one journal lay slightly ajar, its last entry still marked, unread, for now. The next morning dawned overcast. The sky swollen with the weight of unshed rain. It cast a dull gray hue over the Walker estate, blurring the sharp lines of its otherwise manicured perfection. Inside, the silence was different from before, no longer heavy with secrets, but taut with expectation. Richard sat at the kitchen table, the half-drunk mug of coffee in his hands long gone cold. Across from him sat Sophia, flipping slowly through Julia's journal, volume 4 of 6, retrieved from the attic at dawn. They had agreed to go through it together, page by page. No skipping. Each entry was a breadcrumb from a woman whose voice had gone unheard for too long. May 5, Sophia read aloud. Elizabeth wouldn't eat dinner. Victoria said she was being dramatic, forced her to sit at the table for an hour in silence. I wanted to intervene, but Richard said we should let Victoria toughen her up. I think that was the first time I truly felt like a stranger in my own home. Richard exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. Sophia flipped the page. May 7. Victoria changed my medication schedule, said she was helping me stay sharp by lowering the dose. I know my body. I know what I need, but I didn't want to argue again. I'm tired of being told I'm overreacting. Richard looked up. Medication? Sophia nodded slowly. You said she was helping manage things after Julia's diagnosis. Do you think she was controlling the meds? I let her handle the prescriptions, he whispered. God help me, I thought she was helping. They kept reading, each entry carved deeper into the truth, each one an echo from a woman who saw the danger and was dismissed in the name of control, convenience, and trust. And then, they reached the final entry. June 2. I don't know how much longer I have. The headaches are worse, the fatigue, but I'm more afraid for Elizabeth than I am for myself. Victoria watches her too closely, corrects her, shames her. I caught her grabbing Elizabeth's wrist so hard last week, she left red marks. When I confronted her, she smiled, said I was seeing things. Maybe I am. But if this journal survives me, and someone finds it, please believe me. Victoria is not safe. Sophia stopped reading. The room was silent, save for the low tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Richard closed his eyes. His shoulders curled forward as if he were folding inward from the weight of it all. She was trying to speak, he murmured. And I turned the volume down. Sophia reached across the table, placing her hand over his. You weren't the only one she fooled. I acted, the by least, but Richard shook his head. It's different. I was her husband. I had a responsibility. Sophia didn't argue. There was nothing to soften it now. They sat like that for a while. Grieving. Reckoning. Breathing. Eventually, Richard rose and took the journal in his hands. I want to give this to Margaret, he said. And then, I want to talk to the lawyer. Julia's voice should be part of this legal record. I want Elizabeth to know one day that her mother tried to protect her, that she wasn't silent. Sophia stood. I'll drive you. They dropped Elizabeth at school, where she ran off with a backpack nearly twice her size and a promise from Sophia that she'd be there for pickup. Then they went downtown, to the law office. Margaret met them in the lobby, holding a folder of her own. I had the accountant go over every trust document Victoria ever touched, she said. And Sophia was right. There are discrepancies. Richard stared at her. Like what? Victoria added herself as a contingent guardian in the trust language. It was unsigned, just a draft, but she was laying groundwork. If you'd died, she would have had legal standing to take Elizabeth. Richard's knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the back of a chair for balance. Sophia exchanged a look with Margaret, who nodded somberly. Inside the lawyer's office, they reviewed everything: the journals, the recording of Victoria mocking Elizabeth, the hidden prescription records Sophia found in the back of Julia's journal. It was enough. More than enough. The lawyer looked at Richard, steepling his fingers. If this goes to court, which it might, Victoria's lawyers will try to dismiss all of this as manipulation by a grieving widow. Emotional instability. The overreach of a housekeeper. But the recordings, the written statements, the CPS report, it's strong. Richard leaned forward. I don't care if she tries to spin it. I want her name legally disassociated from Elizabeth's estate. I want full security in place. I want to cut every thread she's ever touched. The lawyer nodded. We can begin that process today. Back at the house that evening, Elizabeth curled up with a new book, a warm blanket, and Sophia by her side. She didn't ask about Victoria. She didn't cry. But as the rain finally began to fall outside, soft, steady, cleansing, she whispered to Sophia, Daddy's different now. Sophia kissed her forehead. He's listening now. And from upstairs, behind a locked cabinet, Julia's journals rested, not buried, not forgotten, heard. The next morning brought with it the hum of new beginnings, a softness in the air that hadn't been felt in the Walker estate for months. The previous night's rain had left the ground soaked but fresh, as if the land itself had exhaled. Sophia stood in the kitchen, preparing Elizabeth's favorite breakfast: oatmeal with brown sugar and blueberries. The scent drifted through the halls, warm and homey, stirring something comforting in her chest. Elizabeth ran in moments later, still in her pajama set with ducks printed across the fabric. Her hair was a tousled halo and her laugh was light, genuine. Daddy said I can bring Mr. Bunny to school today, she announced, holding up the worn rabbit like a prize. Sophia grinned. He's earned a day out, I think. Richard entered behind her, shirt sleeves rolled, a cup of coffee in hand. He looked different now, not less burdened, but more present. His gaze lingered on Elizabeth, and when he kissed the top of her head, there was no performance in it, just fatherhood, plain and raw. After breakfast, Sophia walked with Elizabeth to the car. When they returned to the house, Richard nodded toward the office. There's something I'd like you to see. She followed him in. The air inside was cooler, lined with bookshelves and the faint smell of leather and old printer ink. He moved to the desk and retrieved a small, faded envelope from a drawer. I found this in a shoebox behind Julia's books. It was sealed, never mailed. Sophia took the envelope carefully. It was addressed in Julia's handwriting. To Sophia Martinez, open only if I'm gone. Sophia froze. Her name, she looked up, uncertain. I think she wrote it toward the end, Richard said, when things were getting worse. With trembling hands, Sophia peeled the seal open. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, still scented faintly with lavender. She unfolded it and read silently. Dear Sophia, if you are reading this, then I am no longer able to protect Elizabeth myself. That thought breaks my heart more than anything else. But I need to believe that someone good will be left standing beside her. Someone like you. I've seen the way she looks at you, safe, open, without fear. And I've seen the way you look back. You love her, not because it's your job, but because you have that rare gift, the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or expectations. I've tried to warn Richard about Victoria, but he's too deep in his own guilt to see clearly. He blames himself for my diagnosis, my fear, my sadness. And Victoria knows it. She feeds on it. I worry about what will happen to Elizabeth if Victoria stays in this house. I've watched her undermine me, belittle me. I've heard the things she whispers to my daughter when she thinks I'm not listening, and I see the shadows in Elizabeth's eyes, but I also see hope. And that hope, Sophia, is you. If I'm gone, promise me one thing. Stay. Stay as long as Elizabeth needs you, because when she remembers her childhood, I want her to remember love. I want her to remember your songs at bedtime, your stories, your hand on her back when she's scared. I want her to remember you. With all my heart, Julia. Sophia pressed the letter to her chest, tears silently falling. She knew, she whispered. She knew all along. Richard stood beside her, his voice thick. She trusted you. Sophia looked up. I won't leave her. I won't leave either of you. With thousand condenunit, friend. The weight of the letter, the grief, the years of silence, everything sat between them. And in that moment, without words, a new bond formed. Not romantic, not yet, but something fierce, protective, sacred. Later that evening, Sophia made a copy of the letter, storing it with the other evidence, but kept the original in her drawer, a promise she would never break. In the nursery, Elizabeth played on the floor with coloring books. She paused when Sophia walked in and said softly, "You look sad." Sophia knelt beside her. "A little, but it's a good kind of sad. Sometimes when we love someone very much, we remember them and feel both happy and sad at the same time." Elizabeth looked thoughtful. "Like when I think about Mommy." Sophia nodded. "Can I draw her a picture?" Elizabeth asked. "Yes, sweet girl," Sophia said, her voice catching. She would love that. And together, they began to draw. A mother, a daughter, and the woman who stood between the darkness and the light. By Thursday morning, the house had settled into a new rhythm, a cautious peace, like a piano slowly retuned after being too long out of tune. The storm that had ripped through their lives left behind a stillness filled not with silence, but with space. Space for healing, and space for answers. Richard had made an appointment with Dr. Clarice Bellamy, a child trauma specialist based in Stamford. She came highly recommended, compassionate, grounded, and known for her ability to listen deeply. The kind of woman who didn't just ask questions, but knew when not to. Sophia rode with Elizabeth in the back seat as Richard drove them to the appointment. The little girl clutched Mr. Bunny tightly, her fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of his ears again and again. "It's just a chat, sweetheart," Sophia whispered. "You're not in trouble. We just want someone to help you feel better inside." Elizabeth nodded, but her eyes remained downcast. She hadn't spoken much all morning. Since Julia's letter was found, it was as if she had grown quieter, still aware, perhaps, that love had once again wrapped itself around her, but also conscious that grief had never really left. The office was bright, warm, decorated with sunflowers and watercolor paintings. Dr. Bellamy greeted them personally, tall and graceful. Her silver hair swept into a low bun. She knelt to Elizabeth's level, smiled softly. "I've been told you're very brave," she said, "and very smart." Elizabeth didn't answer, but she didn't retreat either. A good start. Once the session began, Richard and Sophia waited outside. They sat in silence at first, watching the occasional other family pass through the reception area. A boy with autism, and his exhausted mother, a teenage girl scrolling her phone, refusing to look up, lives unfolding in parallel, stitched by the same thread of silent wounds. "I didn't realize how much Elizabeth was holding inside," Richard finally said. "She held it because she didn't want to lose your love," Sophia replied quietly. "Children think pain is their fault." He looked at her, the depth of his guilt etched plainly on his face. "I'm trying," he said, "but I'm scared I've broken something in her." "She's not broken," Sophia said firmly. "She's healing. Here's." When the door opened 45 minutes later, Dr. Bellamy stood with a small notepad in her hands. She spoke. She said softly. Not everything, but she spoke. Richard stood. "What did she say?" "Let's take this in steps," Dr. Bellamy replied, guiding them into a private side room. There, she laid her notes gently on the table. "She remembers more than we thought. Specific phrases, tones of voice, punishments. Some of it is still fragmented, typical with complex trauma, but the emotional imprint is clear. She associated Victoria with danger." Richard swallowed hard. "Did she say anything about Julia?" "She dreams of her. Often. And those dreams are mixed with guilt. She believes that after her mother died, she didn't cry enough. That somehow her sadness let something bad happen." Sophia put her hand to her chest. "She blames herself?" Dr. Bellamy nodded. "Children find ways to create order from chaos. If something terrible happened, their mind decides it must be because they didn't do something right." Richard leaned forward. "What do we do?" "She'll need consistent therapy, a safe environment, repetition of truth." Dr. Bellamy opened her notebook again. "And both of you will need to help rewrite her narrative. Show her that her feelings aren't dangerous, that she's allowed to be sad, allowed to be angry, and that she didn't do anything wrong. Sophia nodded slowly. We'll do it. Dr. Bellamy looked at her. She trusts you, deeply. That bond can be a